Andrew moved in on a Tuesday. The building was older, the kind of place that might have once had doormen, polished floors, and polished people to match. Now it just creaked. Paint peeled quietly along the hallways. A faint mildew smell lived near the stairwells. Someone had left a broken umbrella in the foyer and no one had moved it in weeks. But the fourth-floor corner unit had windows on 2 sides, and at least the plumbing worked. Nothing special, but quiet. And cheap, far cheaper than anything else in that part of the city. The kind of deal people either call a steal or a trap. The landlord was the polite, hands-off type. Khakis, thin polo, smile like someone trying to remember a joke that never quite landed. He didn't give a tour, just handed over the keys and said, "You'll find everything you need." Then, almost as an afterthought, "Last tenant left in a rush. Guess the city got to her." He didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. The man didn't ask. He was tired, and tired people don't always pay attention to the details. The lease was signed, the deposit paid, and no one asked what he was running from, which was exactly what he wanted. But in hindsight, maybe someone should have. That should have been the first warning. The first few days were uneventful. Boxes, still stacked in corners. Plastic forks and paper takeout bags. Furniture arriving one piece at a time. Late nights spent figuring out where things should go. Couch here, desk there, bed by the wall so it gets the morning light. It was the normal rhythm of moving in, of restarting. He didn't unpack everything. Some boxes stayed closed. But that's normal too. People always think they'll get around to it later, when it feels more like home. But within a week, something began to feel wrong. Not dramatically. Not like in horror movies, no flickering lights or slamming doors. Just a slow, gnawing sense that things weren't behaving the way they should. The bedroom door, for instance. He'd open it all the way in the morning, let the air move through, clear the stale sleep from the walls. But every afternoon, he'd find it half closed again. Not slammed shut, not bumped or jammed, just swung inward, as if someone had quietly crept in, then stopped halfway. He tested it, checked the floor, the hinges, leveled the door frame with an app. No drafts, no slope, no explanation, just that slow, creeping swing. Then there was the ceiling fan in the living room. It made a soft, rhythmic click, like fingernails tapping in sequence, even when the switch was off. Even after he unscrewed the bulbs and pulled the chain, the clicking stayed. Sometimes it got faster. Other times, it stopped the moment he stepped into the room and started again when he left. He tried to tell himself it was old wiring, that buildings sometimes do make noise, that this was still better than where he'd come from. But even then, he couldn't explain the closet. There was a lock on the outside, sure. That was common. But inside, on the interior panel, was a second lock. A deadbolt, bolted inward, like someone once wanted to stay inside, or keep something from getting in. They were all small details, minor quirks, the kind of things you brush off when the rent is low and the lease is binding. Nothing dangerous, nothing that screamed, "Leave." Just enough to notice, just enough to whisper, "This place remembers something." It was on a Saturday when the first message appeared. He was brushing his teeth when his phone buzzed and skidded off the edge of the sink. It slid down the gap behind the cabinet, just out of reach. When he reached down to retrieve it, his eyes caught something dark beneath the porcelain lip of the cabinet. Writing. 3 words, in uneven, shaky strokes, drawn in what looked like a felt-tip marker. "Don't trust mirrors." Weird. Not exactly threatening, but definitely not welcome. His first thought was, prank. Maybe a joke from a former tenant, or a bored teenager with too much time and too little supervision. But still, it gave him a strange feeling, like he was stepping into the middle of a conversation that had already started without him. That night, he stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, staring, waiting. For what? He didn't know. Nothing happened. But that didn't make him feel better. He told himself to ignore it, to get on with things. But he couldn't help looking more closely after that. And what he started to find didn't feel like a joke anymore. A few days after the first message, he found another. This time behind the light switch plate in the kitchen. He was trying to swap in a dimmer, something to soften the late-night glare. When he unscrewed the faceplate, he noticed a faint black smudge on the drywall beneath. At first, he thought it was a burn mark. But no, it was handwriting. Thin, precise, as if written with care and urgency. "They see you when you sleep." He stared at it for a while, not sure what to make of the phrasing. They nodded. And see you. Not hurt, not follow, just watch. It was somehow worse that way. Later that week, while dusting the windowsill in the living room, his fingers brushed against something rough. A small patch of wood had been scraped over and over with something sharp. Car keys, maybe, or fingernails. Etched deep into the paint were 3 words. Block the vent. No explanation. No context. Just warning. It was beneath the sill where the floor vent sat. And suddenly, the ductwork, the cold air trickling out at night, felt like a mouth breathing under the floorboards. The last message was the hardest to find. It wasn't written. It was carved. Inside the bedroom closet, behind a row of coat hooks. Barely visible unless the light hit it just right. Midnight is the worst. The words were crooked, uneven, like whoever scratched them was in a hurry or scared. The I in midnight had been carved twice, corrected nervously, as if the hand that made it had been shaking. By then, it was clear. Whoever had lived here before him hadn't just moved out. They tried to leave a message, or several, pieces of a puzzle hidden in plain sight. Not loud, not dramatic, but desperate in their own way. They weren't notes from someone who lost their mind. They were the breadcrumbs of someone trying to make sense of something no one would believe. Trying to survive something. Andrew started to change his routines. The mirrors, especially the bathroom one, were covered with old towels, taped down at the corners like a child sealing off a nightmare. The bedroom vent was blocked with a stack of hardcover books and a weighted blanket. Later, he taped it shut completely. The bedroom door stayed locked. Even though there was no one else in the apartment, even though there had never been any sign of an intruder, he couldn't explain why, only that it felt necessary. And still, sleep unraveled. What used to be a peaceful 6 to 7 hours dissolved into broken fragments. Microsleeps. Sweat-soaked tosses. The kind of half-rest that leaves the body still tired and the mind more alert. Each night, he began waking at the same time. 3:12 a.m. Not 3:11. Not 3:13. Always 3:12. Every time, he'd open his eyes suddenly, not because of a noise, but because of a feeling that someone had just left the room. Like breath cooling on the back of your neck. Like ice turning away right as you wake up. Like the echo of a presence that shouldn't be there, but was. Eventually, he decided to stay up. Just once. To see what happened. He turned off all the lights and sat in the living room in silence. No TV. No music. Just the distant hum of traffic and the soft tick of the wall clock. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. 3:12 a.m. Came and went. Nothing happened. He let out a slow breath. Felt almost stupid. Almost embarrassed. He stood up to go to bed. And that's when he heard it. A sound. So faint he almost thought it was in his head. A soft scrape. A dragging sound. Like something thin being pulled across tiles. It didn't come from outside. Didn't come from above. Didn't come from the hallway. It came from the wall. Behind the taped-up vent. The next morning, with daylight flooding through the windows and everything looking painfully ordinary again, he made a decision. He called the landlord and asked about the tenant before him. The landlord paused when asked about the previous tenant. Not a long pause, just long enough to feel deliberate. Then he gave a small shrug, like someone resetting the conversation. She left everything, he said. Furniture, clothes, food in the fridge. Rent was paid up, though. He hesitated. No contact, no explanation. Just disappeared. The words were delivered flatly, as if he'd rehearsed them, as if he'd said them before. The man asked if there were any records. A storage unit. Emergency contact. Paper trail. Anything. That's when the landlord's tone changed. He didn't shrug this time. Didn't smile. Just looked at the man, quiet for a moment. Then said, "Look, whatever she was running from." A pause. I think it followed her. That's all I'll say. Then he turned and walked away. That night, the apartment felt smaller. Tighter. The shadows stretched longer. The silence became a presence. He found himself standing in the bathroom, staring at the covered mirror. The towel over it had sagged slightly in the corner, as if something had been tugging at it. He pulled it down. Not out of bravery. Not out of defiance. Just frustration. A need to see something, even if it scared him. Behind the mirror, taped flat against the wall where the glass would have rested, was a photograph. A Polaroid. Old, curling at the corners. but not yellowed, not ancient. Recent enough to feel personal. It showed the kitchen. This kitchen. Same cracked tile. Same cabinets. Same chipped handle on the drawer beneath the sink. In the photo, a woman sat at the table. Her hands were pressed flat against the wood. Her eyes wide. Her mouth open, caught in a frozen scream, as if the camera had fired a moment too soon, or a moment too late. And behind her, deep in the hallway, barely visible in the shadow, a shape. No detail. No face. Just height. Presence. Too tall. Too narrow. Too still. Like someone, or something, watching her from the dark. Just standing. Waiting. Andrew stared at the photo for a long time. Not moving. Not blinking. Not breathing. Frozen. Like something inside him had stopped processing. Or started listening. Minutes passed. He never looked away. Just kept staring at that shadow in the hallway. The one frozen in the photograph, yet somehow still watching. Then, slowly he stood up. Not with panic. Not with purpose. Just movement. Mechanical. Weightless. Like someone going through steps they didn't remember learning. He walked into the bedroom. Picked up his duffel bag. Threw clothes inside without checking sizes, seasons, or if they were even his. Didn't fold anything. Didn't close the drawers. Didn't seal the boxes that had stayed unpacked since he arrived. There were no thoughts in his head. Not fear. Not logic. Not even confusion. Only silence. A deep, pressurized silence. The kind that fills your ears underwater. He didn't sleep. Didn't sit down. Didn't drink water. Just stood for a while in the middle of the empty living room, as if waiting for something. And by sunrise, he was gone. He didn't leave a note. Didn't notify the landlord. Didn't post online. Didn't call a friend. Didn't cancel his mail or stop his billing. No trace. No goodbye. He simply vanished. As if whatever had watched the last tenant leave had now slipped quietly inside him and walked him out the same door. Months passed, and eventually the apartment was listed again. Same unit, same square footage, still cheap, still quiet. A new tenant moved in, young, soft-spoken, smiled a lot, looking for a fresh start. The landlord didn't explain why the rent was low, didn't mention the two people who had moved in and out within 6 months, didn't talk about the towel-covered mirrors, or the scratched windowsill, or the sealed vent. The new tenant didn't ask. They were just glad to be somewhere new, somewhere different, somewhere quiet. A week later, while arranging storage boxes in the closet, they reached for the top shelf. And there, beneath a thin layer of dust, carved into the wood in jagged, uneven strokes, a message. Fresh, unpainted, raw. 312. Don't open the vent.